Welcome to LinkedUp, Breaking Boundaries in Education, a podcast that focuses on what is happening in education today, connecting everyone to the movers and shakers that are breaking boundaries in the education arena.
Well, hello, welcome back to LinkedUp Breaking Boundaries in Education. Jerri, we've had several different eSports conversations. It's funny because when you go to conferences now, there is always something on eSports. Even an eSports arena that we got to check out at ISTE. But I don't know, like 6-7 years ago, you really didn't see a lot of this conversation happening at conferences. So esports is definitely trending. It has been on the rise, as we know. And at ISTE, we got to meet today's guest. Because of esports, I think he was there. We saw him in the esports arena, but we also met him from our good friend Ken Shelton. Of course, usually it was at the bar, just as usual, right, Jerri? It was at the bar.
That's where we meet all the great people.
All the great guests. But yeah, Ken introduced us. So I'm looking forward to hearing all about the trends and innovations that are happening now in esports.
Yes, our guest today is James O'Hagan, and he is here to talk about esports. Right before the show, he was telling me that there is a real difference between esports and scholastic gaming, and so I'm interested to hear about that. But before we get started, James, if you would tell us just a little bit about yourself and how'd you get into this esports?
Couple of things, Jerri and Jamie. First off, Ken, I know, has said that he was the most downloaded episode of your podcast, and it is my goal to get myself to be number one. So, sorry, Ken, I'm going for your record. I am an educator of over 20 years. So I started as an elementary school teacher in the south suburbs of Chicago. I grew up in the San Francisco area where my mother was actually a computer resource teacher for many years and also a chef. But my journey towards scholastic gaming and esports started about 10 years ago while I was in Rockford Public Schools, and I was serving as the instructional technology director for the district. It has been one of these journeys where 10 years ago, gaming was not something that was, socially acceptable. Even with my own students, when I was teaching in the classroom, I used to run a computer gaming club, it was just a computer club, but it quickly became a computer gaming club. And what we were doing was teaching kids about networking, about how to strip down computers, rebuild them, all for the purpose of playing games. And the journey to get me to where I am now, serving as the Vice President of Education Innovation at LeagueSpot, which is a company that focuses in on creating the environments for safe and secure play, has been just a tremendous journey. And it's funny, I know you've talked about at the beginning of this how there's all these sessions now on esports at conferences. 10 years ago, I gave sessions about esports, and I would get maybe 3 people in the room, and 2 of them would think I was talking about Spanish sports. So, because they would go, "What's esportes?" And I'm like, no, esports. And then, so it's been a heck of a journey to go from last session of a conference, those Friday afternoons when everybody's already left, but that's your spot, to having an arena at ISTE this year.
Yeah, to having the arena at ISTE this year, right? What I think is so interesting too is that even like 10 years ago, you couldn't even get, when calls for proposals go out, you couldn't even get accepted in a lot of cases too. So, and then if you did, like you said, they were like one of those sessions that probably wasn't going to be a high attendance because of the poor spot. But I mean, it is everything now. It really is. I mean, why? What are the benefits that we're seeing in implementing esports?
Well, it's a couple of things. And again, you get so excited about the idea of having, in my case, an assistant superintendent who says, "Hey, I saw this whole thing about esports on 60 Minutes last night. And I understand that there's scholarships. Can we get access to that? And in your excitement, you just go, yes. You don't think about the educational impacts that this potentially could have. But through my dissertation work and my doctoral work, and I'm not a doctor yet, so please don't call me doctor. There was this journey of looking really proactively at what this really means beyond buying the computers and beyond, figuring out where we're going to play. It comes down to really honing in on what is considered intrinsic motivation. I really believe that gaming and there's data to prove that the intrinsic motivation is underlying and it is there. That this is something that is connecting with kids in a variety of different ways, especially those who are hard to reach, especially those who feel that they don't have a sense of autonomy or relatedness in their classroom, where they don't feel competent in their classroom. And that's many kids. And that's where a lot of our struggles have been over the years in the classroom. So looking at that gaming through the self-determination theory lens, what I started to realize is that according to Pew Research, and this research goes back to 2018, 97% of boys in the teenage years and 83% of the girls in teenage years are playing video games. And that's data from 5 years ago. I can only guess post-pandemic that number has gone up. I don't think that number has gone down at all. So we're probably talking about something that is ubiquitous. There's gaming in all, whether it's elementary, middle, high school, college. Heck, I'm 48 years old and I'm playing video games myself on a regular basis. I get to work at a company that loves gaming, so that's great too. But it's something that if we said that 97% of boys and 83% of girls were into basketball or art or music, our schools would look completely different, right? So deciding how we can meet the students where they are and think through what are the instructional benefits of gaming? Where can we start to look at how this can tie into a classroom and help you reach students who are not engaged? I think of this as especially for the students who, they just don't see themselves in the classroom. They don't see a career. They don't see a pathway for them to college. All of a sudden now, when you say, hey, that thing that you love, you love video games, that thing that you love, I'm going to support you in that changes the whole dynamic between teacher and student, especially when, it's so odd how we as teachers want our students to be these content creators. We want them to be these people who lead their own instruction, who get to a level of mastery where they can teach it to somebody else. And sometimes when we get to that level, it's almost a threat that a student knows more than you in the classroom sometimes. But this is that opportunity where we can help these students who are so intrinsically motivated to want to incorporate or bring gaming into the classroom. I mean, look at Minecraft. We've seen the Battle of the Boroughs in New York City, which is an entire Minecraft event that brings students from all walks of life from across that city together. It is a powerful tool. And the problem that there has been this rush to implementation. People are my friend Becky Keene over at I2E, she talks about season zero. She doesn't focus on the season one aspect of things. She talks about season zero. And season zero is the planning aspect. It's finding out the instructional, where this fits in instructionally, where does this fit in technically, and how do we implement? And a lot of districts, again, skip past all of those things. They want to go right to competition. They want to go right past all the instructional benefits. And I can tell you that when it comes to career and college pathways, esports and gaming is going to hit on every pathway that I can think of. I can't think of a place or a space or a subject matter material where gaming doesn't fit into it. And as soon as some of these kids start to see that, hey, the creative writing that I've been doing all these years, this fan fiction that I've been writing, that has value in what I'm doing in the classroom, all of a sudden now becomes like a real draw to them. Starting a business, a lot of these kids love to, I always ask kids, what is your brand? And how do you present yourself online as a brand? Because we see that there are kids who are creating brands with 500,000, million followers. with nothing more than their cell phones right now. It starts to open that conversation up as well too, when they realize that, hey, you don't have to be 25 years old with millions of dollars to start a business. You could be 16, 15 years old with a cell phone and start to create something that engages people. And again, it's starting to teach a skill, and it's starting to, as we know, the creative culture, the creator culture is something that is a high value in the economy. So gaming culture is embedded into our schools, and it's just a matter of us taking that culture and bringing it all together in a way that educationally we can put the pedagogy and we can put the structure around it to help bring these kids forward.
Has it been a hard sell to educators to bring in gaming? Because games have been like a dirty word. You're just playing games.
It has been not so much in the last couple of years. I mean, thankfully, we have groups like Bloom and CDW and Bytespeed and all these big companies, Microsoft, of course, Intel, Dell, who are bringing in all of these different opportunities to really explore this topic, which has been great. When you get a big company that says, hey, we see value in this. Now, they're going to look at it, of course, from how do we sell more stuff. But I look at it from hey, if it takes these groups working with us to, and again, they're supporting educators along the way. They're bringing voices forward that show that there's value to this. The sale has been getting easier. Like I said, the hard part is the first part. It's the rushed implementation, because you've got these kids who are so excited about what they want to do with this. And it's hard as a teacher to see this excitement and go, okay, pump the brakes a little bit here. But we have to pump the brakes sometimes a little bit to make sure that what we are building now, the culture that we are building, what you do in all of that is important. So it's that first step that you can either have a great esports program and a great experience and a well implemented one with just some forethought, or you can have one that a couple of years down the road you're wondering, why do we only have 10 kids in this, and it's always the same 10 kids. Again, the demographics say everybody should be involved, so let's find ways to bring in everybody.
So you have two different extremes. You have the schools that are hesitant, or boards or teachers or administrators, but then you have those that are seeing those benefits, and perhaps it is student driven, perhaps it is teacher driven, perhaps it is administrators seeing other schools and the success of nearby districts, or seeing all of the wonderful competitions that are involved. And then you have that extreme where they want to jump right in, as you mentioned, and they miss that season zero. What are your recommendations for that season zero, for that first step in implementation?
Yeah, and like I said, Becky Keene at I2E, I have to give her all the credit for that term. I mean, it's such a simple thing, but I have to give her credit for that. In season zero, it really is, what are we doing here? All right. And everybody, the problem in education is that we always love to copy. We go to conferences, we hear all these things. Give me the sheet, give me the form. How did you do this? And we want to skip all the real thinking steps about how to implement this properly. And it's no fault of ours. I mean, heck, we all use some of the same textbooks. We all use some of the same curriculum that we purchase, right? So it bends us to think that, hey, this can be easily replicated. What I love is now we are entering into this 2.0 stage. Evan Abramson over at the over in Warren, New Jersey, right, the Developmental Learning Center, just built an entire space for neurodivergent, specifically for neurodivergent students. It is not about joining a league. It is not about all these other things. The focus was, what can we do? How can we raise these kids up? We're going to take their enthusiasm. How can we raise them up and teach them soft skills? We can teach them technical skills. We can get them interacting with their peers, which we know sometimes with students who are neurodivergent, that's a very difficult thing to do. How do we frame and build that out? If Evan went and just said, hey, I'm going to go join Chris Aviles' wonderful Garden State eSports. Hi, Chris Aviles. I know you've been a guest on this podcast as well, too. That isn't going to necessarily drive the things that the Developmental Learning Center is going to need. So when people are looking at how do we get involved in esports, the first thing is, what are you trying to do with your students? Let's take my own community of Racine, Wisconsin, right? In Racine, we have 20 different elementary schools and several different middle and high schools. We're a mid-sized city school district. In that city, I have two middle schools who came to me at one time and said, "Hey, we would love to get involved with scholastic gaming and esports." And I said, they asked me, "How do I do it?" I said, "Well, you've got two very different schools. One is a fine arts school, where one of your strategic goals is to get your kids on stage performing, right? You want to get them into the performance arts. That is very different than the other middle school that is struggling with attendance, right? So they have two very different needs. In a city where the schools are less than a mile apart from each other, you have two very different needs of what esports can look like. So right out the gate, the performing arts school is probably going to say, "Hey, we want to make sure that we are bringing in shoutcasting," which if you don't know what shoutcasting is like putting the production out on the internet. It's having people who are broadcasting it. It is having, soundstage people who are working, get these kids involved in the back end. And then versus the attendance, which is going to be more focused on, hey, we have to build relationships and we're going to use games to build those relationships. Does it mean that they have to join a league? Absolutely not. Esports, especially think of a lot of our rural schools, right? Areas where internet access is not ubiquitous. I know that the federal government is doing a great job to fund rural broadband connectivity right now, but esports can be done within its own school. You don't have to create a league per se. You could create, think of intramurals, right? There's actually a school I worked with on the north side of Milwaukee where they had a group of young men, 15, 16 years old. Now, this is an area of Milwaukee that is high poverty, high crime. And these young men, one of the goals is to help them become young leaders of their community. And they asked me about creating an esports league. And I said, look, we can create it. I can get you into the Wisconsin High School Association, no problems, right? We can do that real quick. I said, or, again, this is season 0. Let's think about this. And it's working with the 15 and 16-year-olds and having this conversation with them, not with the principal, not with their, it is, what if instead we work with developing something in-house so that you can run a league for the first, second, and third graders? Think about that. Now you've got these 15, 16-year-olds who are working with some of these kids who are going to be their cousins or their brothers and their sisters, helping them play and have fun. And really, this is what it comes down to, is it comes down to the power of play. During the pandemic, we saw just how important play was. With No Child Left Behind, play really got pushed to the side, and now we're starting to see again that the benefit of play and bringing that back into our schools is really important for not just engagement of kids, but also for their brain development. I mean, we're talking about the neuroscience of play and creating these pathways. Is more reading and more math going to make kids more excited to be at school? Probably not. I could, as a teacher, I don't want to teach another 30 minutes of math a day. Are you kidding me? So at least I didn't. So, but I always was the one to have my kids out for recess 2-3 times a day, just to get them out. And it wasn't a punishment. If the kid was doing something bad, yeah, I might keep them back for a minute, but just talk to them. But that playtime is so important for them.
Because I think their goal was to make them leaders. Well, what better way than to organize that whole system and be mentors at the same time? That's brilliant. That really makes a lot of sense, and it's a great way. It's sustainable. They can continue doing that, but in other cases, schools might start out that way and then join leagues later on. So that's a great point.
Slow to go fast, right? You need to think about what the goal is, where we're headed, and connect it to curriculum. Is that what the scholastic gaming is?
So when I talk about scholastic gaming, I'm talking more about using games not just for competition, but also potentially for clubs, for casual play. And here's the other thing too, talking about that season 0. Every school and every school district, good ones, are going to have strategic goals. These are the things that they are trying to move the needle on. I have sat down with administrators before in the past, and they said there is no way our strategic goals fit into scholastic gaming and esports. And I said, I will prove you wrong. Give me 10 minutes. I'm going to figure it out here. And here's the reason why we want to start really looking at what the strategic goals of a school district or a school are in relation to scholastic gaming and esports. It's because as we are facing these fiscal cliffs, the COVID money is going away, and there's many districts that are going to be looking at their funding in the next couple of years, particularly. We need to start thinking about how is this, again, moving a needle forward. In my own school district in Racine, when I was the virtual learning director, I was able to increase our funding for esports every year in the face of fiscal deficits. And I'm not talking like a couple of $1,000s. I'm talking like tens of millions of dollars of fiscal deficits. I was able to increase it because we were reaching those kids who we were not getting, because our program was based around how we were meeting the strategic goals of the district or the schools. And so because we could do that, of course the school board is going to want to fund, they're not going to want to cut something that is being successful and moving the needle with kids that they are already having difficulty reaching. So it is always important and imperative. I beg everybody, if you do nothing else, sit down, and it shouldn't take you very long. And if it does, then you really need to study and find out really what scholastic gaming and esports is. And they can do that through my podcast, The Academy of Esports. Little plug there. They can start to see where this all fits together in their own picture. And they might say, yeah, competition, we want to join a league. We're going to go join, Generation Esports or they may say, hey, we want to create our own league in-house, in which case they call me at LeagueSpot, and I can help them, show them how they can generate and build their own league in-house. Or, it might just be, hey, we just want to get our kids playing in safe spaces and places. And now it becomes a club. And now they're looking at bringing different games, game titles together. Just, again, safe places for kids.
And that safety is a huge issue, I think. Everyone is worried about kids being safe online, and so it's nice. I also think most schools have a goal to increase attendance. Attendance is always a problem. And I can see how kids would want to come to school to be involved in this.
And to speak to that specifically, there is data to suggest that once you get, and this goes back to Department of Education data from the 90s, and it's still real today. You get kids involved in an extracurricular activity at school, two things are going to happen. Attendance is going to go up and GPA increases. Now, if you get kids GPAs and attendance increasing, guess what else is going to happen? They're going to graduate. We spend so much money in schools trying to find that silver bullet that is going to help our kids with reading or math or whatever. But really, when it gets down to it, it's about attendance. It's about, are these kids here and are they engaged? And this is a tool. This is not, again, I'm not selling a silver bullet. I'm not selling a way that is always going to work. Because again, we have to think strategically about this. But this is one way that we can start to engage kids that really, in my experience, I have never seen something move the needle quite like this before with some of our hardest to reach students.
I love that because we know as educators, there is not one way to get kids to school, but this is another way to attract more students. And I remember when Chris was on our podcast, he talked about how they even incorporate character skills into what they're doing. And it's much like coaching a sport. You're developing leadership and kids to be great people, which is so important.
I have 5 pillars, and I'm going to leave you with, because I know we're up on time, but I've got 5 pillars that I work around. Number 1, I want to redefine athletic culture in our schools. I want to see our schools' athletic culture now be not this, we have a culture, a changing culture in our schools. We need to address our athletic culture, and esports is one way to do that. Number 2, I want to get kids involved in extracurricular activities because of the reasons I said before. We're going to increase GPA and attendance. Number 3, I want to promote good mental and physical health. Getting kids involved with a positive adult interaction and playing are 2 of the cheapest and easiest ways that we can start to impact mental health for our kids in a positive way. I also want to increase physical health consideration. So, hey, now that they are really excited about playing these video games and they want to get good at it, now we can start talking about, let's drink more water. Let's get some exercise. Lifting weights. The kids go, I don't want to lift weights. I'm like, do you realize that lifting weights helps with the the pathways in your brain to problem solve. Now we're talking about neuroscience. Now we're introducing neuroscience into esports. I want to get those good college and career pathways sorted. And finally, I want to honor the importance of play because, again, play has been something that I think in our schools has been pushed to the edges and is seen as a luxury. And I see play as a necessity in our schools. And this is just a way to honor that importance.
You are hitting on all cylinders there. That's like the perfect storm of what needs to be happening in education today, for sure. Yes. And can you reiterate what your podcast was called?
My podcast is called The Academy of eSports. I've been doing it for over 6 years now, and there's a lot of great speakers, a lot of great opportunities to. You don't have to do it linear. You can pick and choose who you want to listen to. There's a lot of collegiate folks. There's a lot of educators in there. There's a lot of thought leaders. So Ken Shelton was one of my guests at one time. I think we're talking to Ken about gaming and esports through the lens of equity and equality. Those are real topics as well too. Because when people say, "What games are you going to want to play?" Well, it isn't always going to be the same games that the kids at the other school are playing. So that's where, again, the planning comes into all of this. So.
All right. So what we're going to do in the show notes is give a link to your podcast. We have a podcast smash here, like we like to do. And we will also give the details on LeagueSpot. So that way, if people want to get started, then they have some guidance there. This was terrific. Thank you so much. I mean, it really is a great way to be inclusive as well and make sure everyone has something. And if this is something that students are really, and as you said, the percentages are up there. So many kids are involved in gaming. So let's bring it to the schools and get some improvements all around. Love it.
Thank you for listening. And if you would like to stay linked up, be sure to follow us on Apple and Spotify and subscribe to us on YouTube.